That was one thing that we learned we've learned in our lives. But at the youth conference, they're teaching the youth at FCF what we learned here, the adults, about being excellent in ministry, about helping your pastor before he even says it. Amen. Or has to even ask, about picking up on these things and helping your parents. Parents, this is where you want to send your kids to, because they drill them about how to treat your parents. And school them on what it's like to respect your parents and to respect authority. They got a good dose of it. And believe me, for them to stay there, because I know sometimes I can, especially with the youth, I can be hard on them and like no business, no messing around. That's it. Go to bed. We're going to sleep. Those types of things. They were troopers. And what they saw was in life isn't always fun. And you don't get to do all the fun things you want to do all the time. Great example, there's a basketball court there. All of them love to play basketball. But you don't get to play basketball. You can play basketball here. There's a jump house, all these things. They want to do these things, but they were there for a different reason. And so they, with good attitudes, no talking back, any correction that was given, they listened and they did it. The boys did it. You too, I appreciate it. Excellent. One time, that's all I had to speak. One time, they turned. So I appreciate it. You can see what you put in them and it comes out. Spoke one time, they knew, meant business, it was done. And they carried themselves, all the youth carried themselves with great respect and honor, knew what to do, but they know how to hear the word. They respected what was going on. They knew how to hear the word, and they were picking up on things. And the conversations that they had with us were mature about ministry, about God. It wasn't just, thank you for today. They were going deep. So they've been well trained here, and we really appreciate that. So faithful in season. We know that seasons change, and this is the autumn season, fall season. And to be faithful, we've been talking about faithfulness, and I believe, and I've always got more out of when you go back and you kind of continue on something. And you kind of milk that thing for everything that it's got in it. Get everything you can out of it. And we learned a few weeks ago that faithfulness is consistency, constant, reliable, dependable, somebody that's always there. We honored faithfulness a couple weeks ago. We honored faithfulness today, talking about these people that do the same thing over and over and are very dependable, and it's like clockwork, they're going to be there. That's who God is. That's how our faith is when we put it in Him. Doubt and unbelief think He's not going to be there. He's not going to answer. But faith believes He's reliable, He's dependable, and I can run to Him every time. Those kids text RD, text him all the time because they know He's going to answer. They'll text me sometimes, and it won't get back to them for a while. So guess what? They stop texting. That's a message to us. We don't answer, they're going to quit calling. We don't answer, they're going to quit calling. And so for us, that's the same way with God. He's always talking to us. And if we think He's not answering, and doubt says that, guess what happens? We quit calling. Because we think and we have this belief that He's not answering. So we quit calling. But He is faithful and true. And He's always there. In the fruit of His Spirit, that Spirit that He sent here to us. In Galatians 5:22 and 23 says that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy. This is what being produced. This is what they're teaching the kids at FCF. This is what comes out of you when you're squeezed. When you're pressured and we feel pressure, this is what should come out. Love, joy, peace, patience or long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such there is no law. So why is this? Look at all of these characteristics. God is love. He is our joy. He is peace. Gave us his peace. He is peace. Is he not long-suffering with us? And patient? Now, if he operated with me the way I do with the teenagers sometimes, it'd be very hard. I told you once, don't make me tell you again. But I've not always been the quick doer, the quick obedience, been hard-headed. And he said, don't be like that one that needs led around with a bit in its mouth. Don't be like that. Yield to it and go with it. Don't buck against it. Yield to it. And when I just touch it, that horse that's trained, just touch it. It knows where to go. A little call, it knows where to go. A little leading here, a little leading there. That's what faithfulness does. He is kind. Has he ever treated you unkind? When you really get down to it, has he ever been unkind to you? Your relationship, I'm talking about you and God, he's never been unkind to us. Never in our lives. Not once could we question his kindness. When we truly approach him, was he not kind? He said, if you need wisdom, ask, and know that I'm not going to beat you over the head for asking. I told you to do that the first time. No, he gives to all men liberally and without reproach. Gentle. He has self-control. When he could execute his wrath, he didn't. He put it on his son so that this could be right here, executed in our lives. But faithfulness, somebody that's dependable and always there, consistent, someone you can count on. We talked about a few weeks ago that trusting in an unfaithful man is like a broken tooth or a foot out of joint. Michelle said I kept saying to you guys, joint out of foot the other day. And so that was how my speech was. It was joint out of foot. It wasn't foot out of joint. So that's how it was. I said it over and over. I didn't even realize what I was saying, and I wondered why everybody was laughing. I thought, they must think it's a very funny joke. But it was my speech. It was what I was saying. I was saying joint out of foot. But it's really a foot out of joint. And that foot out of joint, you limp on. You try to rely upon it, and you can't. You bite down on it. You get that good ice cream. Oh, you can't take the sore tooth, the broken tooth. You bunch down on a good piece of jerky, you're hurting. You cannot rely on someone that's unfaithful. So when we put ourselves in our relationship with God, why would we choose to rely upon ourselves? We are unfaithful, period, compared to God's faithfulness. Right? And yet, I choose to rely upon myself to get stuff done. One thing that they taught us in the leadership said, listen, if somebody could do your job 80% of it, give it to them. He said, if you're running a business and somebody could do 80% of your job and do it well, give them your position. And then you move on. That's right. And you delegate. So they had different ways of looking at it. But they talked about that, how you use the people around you and the gifts in there, because we are one body. We're not one elbow. They said, you ever went to Walmart and saw one leg in the line? You ever went to Sheetz and saw one leg buying a milkshake? Hey, leg, how's it going? The whole body's looking at him like, what? What are you doing out of the body? Or the elbow. We need every part. And you go down to that little toe or whatever it would be. When one hurts, the whole body hurts. Faithful. So that's who he is to us, and that's who he always has been. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He was always faithful. He fed them when they didn't deserve to be fed. He lit up the night for them. Kept them cool during the day when they didn't deserve it. They chose to go their own way. He still gave it to them. They chose to have a king. He still gave it to them. They wanted to rule themselves. Okay. Sooner or later, what happens like with these kids, they find something real. The things that they've been chasing and the things that they've invested their time in, or their heart in these relationships that don't last, they find something real that's true. Here's a good example. This church has been there 31 years. All right, Pastor Mark and Stephanie Motor. 31 years up there. My son, we were in the cafeteria, gym, at the gym, and we don't realize, we have a lot. We have a lot, and we are so blessed. And we're in the gym, and they're sitting everybody's eating lunch. My son gets a plate and goes and sits by himself. All right? He sits by himself. And there's this group of kids from the church there sitting over at this table with one of our kids. And they said, one of our kids said, "Hey, Isaiah, come over here and sit with us." The kid sitting there, one of their older kids said, "Hey, come sit with us, man." And Isaiah just did. There's only one seat over there. Only one seat for him. And he just and he sat by himself. The kid gets up from the table. The kid that yelled for him, not our kid, the kid from that church, gets his plate, looks at the whole table, and he says, "Let's go." Made them pick up their plate, go sit beside him. And he came over there, and I heard the kid say it out of his mouth. He looked at Isaiah right in the eyes. He goes, "Nobody sits alone at our church." I went through me. I'm like, those kids know the real love of God. They've been trained to do that, and it's uncomfortable being a kid like that. Got up, went over, and sat with them. All right? That's excellent. Nobody can make friends like David. David doesn't know a stranger. I'm constantly on parent mode when we go with places with these kids. I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're good. And 4 adults. We're good. And I'm counting them everywhere we go. I get to 8 and I'm like, where is David? And I'm going everywhere. I go back to the gym. I go look. I'm looking for him. And RD's like, "What's wrong, man?" I'm like, "I can't find David anywhere. Do you know where he went?" And he's like, "He's over there." In the middle of all these kids from other churches, there's David talking to him, making friends. And I couldn't see, he had a Steph Curry jersey on. I couldn't even see him. But he's in the middle of them. But he's being kind to people. He doesn't know a stranger. He's showing the love of God. So that kid, the way David showed that, the way our kids did, the way that kid went out of his comfort zone to say, nobody's sitting alone. That's what Jesus did. Yeah. He said, nobody's going to sit alone in my Father's house. I'm coming to you. And he welcomed all that come to him, and he healed them all. He went about doing good in healing all that were oppressed of the devil, for God was with him. Who was? God himself, who is love, who is patient, who is gentle and kind. The ones that were making all the noise, they said, "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. Shut up." His disciples telling him, "Shut up." He says, "Send them. Send all those kids." And he said, "You need to act like these kids." Childlike faith. Acting like a child. One gentleman had, one of his things was, he talked about superheroes. And he gets a towel and he wraps it around his neck. He said, "You remember being this as a kid?" And he's running through and everybody's like, "Yeah, you're like Superman." And he said, "You see how you make it fly?" And he takes it and he's flapping it like that. He said, you need to get your superhero, get your towel back on." "Oh, is it a towel?" "No, it's a cape." And then he threw a box up there and he said, "It's just a box. But to a kid, a little girl that thinks about princesses all the time, it's a castle. But a boy, it's a fort." And he got behind the fort. And then he pulls out a stick and he says, "See this stick? Oh, I forgot. It's a sword. Or it's a lifesaver. A lightsaber. Blah, blah, blah. Foot out of joint. Joint out of foot. It's a lightsaber." And he said, it's a sword to a kid, but to adults, Quit playing with those things. Put them down. You're going to break something. You're not Superman. Get the cape off. That's my good towel. Get it back in here. And he said, so we went from kids with these huge imaginations that nothing could stand in front of us because we knew who was with us. We had a superpower on the inside of us as kids. And we were trained as we got older to put those things away. And at the same time, we put our imagination away, which to a kid, that's where his faith would come from. Being able to comprehend these things. In this, we've been trained so long that in situations when they come, I stop loving. Situation arises, I stop having joy. This is a situation where I'm supposed to be sad. I went to a funeral, Pastor David preached, and I'm like, this is everything but sad. Because somebody was going to get born again at the funeral. And everybody was going to be celebrating someone's life, because that's what it was, a celebration of life. It wasn't a funeral to him. He came in and people were going to be born again. He was going to celebrate somebody's life. Totally different. Did the opposite. Philippians 2. Those kids just blessed me. That really blessed me, not only as a parent, but as a pastor. When you see something like that, that is awesome. An example. When I could just run and sit in a corner and enjoy chewing every bite of my meal and not have any noise going on. And all those kids got up and took their plate and sat with him. Paul writes, therefore, if there is any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord and of one mind. That kid was showing me that he knew how his pastors operated. He knew how his church operated. They operated in love. He just didn't make that up. He said, at this church, no one sits alone. Our kids were welcomed by them so much, just it's like family. And just brought in. And Paul's saying this, be of the same, have the same love, being of one accord and of one mind. We're all many different things. We're all many different parts in the body, but we can all have the same love, being of one accord and of one mind, one purpose. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than himself, taking care of each other. Let each of you look not out for your own interests only, but also for the interests of others. This kid was a great example of this. Great example. Looking out for the interests of others. That's what Jesus does. That's what God does. That's who he is. That's who we are. We are Christians. We're Christ followers, disciples of Jesus. Part of our vision of the church is making disciples, going out and raising up an army of believers that know the Word of God and apply it to their life, right? And can passionately share the gospel wherever we go. This is what we should be passionately sharing. Love. Someone asked, they had a breakout session, asked all these youth pastors, said, what do you do? The kids ask these questions, text this guy. What do you do when you face an atheist? How do I deal with this? This close friend of mine is an atheist. Across the board, love them. You love them. You don't have to prove anything. You love them. And love will be that light that shines in the darkness. And the speaker last night said, darkness doesn't exist. You keep saying in this, there's dark times. But darkness doesn't exist. Darkness is only present at a time because there's no light in that place. God didn't create darkness. There was no light. He spoke light. And light was. And darkness was not. So in these places, we got to have to be able to bring love. And he said, you take that light and you run into darkness. You run right into it because it'll flee. it will flee. So let love, and let us each look out for, not only for our own interests, but also for the interests of others. Let's go to Philippians 1. And this is a prayer that Paul's prayed in verse 3. He says, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine, making requests for you all with joy for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Christ. So we have the one that began the good work, completing it until the day of Christ. There's faithfulness. But he said, I thank you for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now. So you've been from the first day faithful all the way to now. You've been faithful. And he's saying, this is in my prayer. I thank you for being faithful. I thank you for being consistent. I thank you for being that person that was dependable and reliable, that I could count on through prayer, whatever it was. Remember, God is faithful and he is true. Have a blessed week.